Today salvation has entered this house. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. These words have again been fulfilled, here. In this today, which perforates time, to propel us all into the eternal time of God's infinity, where the Son of Man dwells, and will dwell with his faithful children. Those who readily have welcomed him. Those who readily have responded to his invitation. Just as this man did, Zacchaeus, who promptly accepted the invitation of the Son of Man. To die to the world and to sin, and be reborn to new life, in Christ, with Christ, and for Christ. Here is the way of the children of God. That once again has been plotted. That once again is alive, in this house. House of divine mercy. House of infinity mercy of God, where the Son of Man has returned, for those who feel sick. For those who feel sinful. For those who feel they need his hand. That hand that heals and saves, and gives life. Zacchaeus was curious, of knowing that man. He wanted to see him. He had heard a great uproar in Jericho. Because Jesus had just healed a blind man, Bartimaeus. That also wanted to silence. And he shouted louder, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy of me. The more they wanted to silence him, the louder he shouted. Jesus had pity of that man. And he healed him. What do you want me to do to you? Give me back my sight. And from that day Bartimaeus saw, not only with eyes of flesh, but he saw with the eyes of the Spirit, because from that day he followed the Son of Man. Therefore there was great uproar in Jericho. We want to see Jesus. Who will make them see Jesus? All those who dead to the world and to sin, who want to put themselves at the service of the brothers, to give them, and indicate to them the privileged way, so that many who are far, coming here in this cradle of love, may see Jesus. Meet Jesus. And have the life-changing experience. To do this, one must be ready to die to the world and to sin. To make that part of oneself, that I, that in many hearts, is alive, that would never want to die, but that once dead, will make it so, that in that heart dwells God. And take up stable dwelling. So that that heart may have life, and have it for eternity. And so that many may have life, and have it for eternity. Here's the call, that today in this gospel page returns to be the center of the path of the children of God, the call. This, Jesus puts at the center in this gospel page, the call one receives, and the answer that one is called upon to give, once the call is received. And that answer must be renewed day by day. So that day by day one stays on the high road, to follow the Master without if and without but. Without getting tired. Without being caught up in doubts, discouragement, from despondency, because once one puts his hand to the plow, one goes forward and wins. This is the way of the children of God, that Jesus has laid out and that these saints, who in time have gone before us, have taught us, by their example of life. Here's the readiness, of Zacchaeus, who hastily comes down and joyfully answers the call, hastily and joyfully. This is the attitude that one must have, just as Jesus in the Catechesis teaches us. Well, we all remember those words. The last words of this message, in whatever case they are found, remain humble and joyful, the children of God. And praise and give thanks, because all that matters is my call that marries their yes and bears fruit, not appearance. Remain humble and joyful. And hurriedly respond, promptly to the call of the Lord. When the Lord calls you to the turning point, dear brother, dear sister, you cannot say tomorrow, wait. Because you miss the call. And there come times when the call is renewed, the so-called call within the call. If Jesus calls you to the turning point, dear brother, dear sister, what do? If you truly love Jesus, with your life, with your heart, more than with words, you say, here I am. Do of me what pleases you. I am here. This is the answer of the children of God, who readily want to win. Zacchaeus had human limitations, stature we are told, he was rich, and Jesus had just talked about the limits of wealth, because he had just met that rich young man who was told, "Leave everything and follow me." You already respect the commandments, very good. But if you want to be perfect, do this other thing. He did not do it. Because for him, wealth was an insurmountable limitation. And of that young man, we know neither his name, nor the end of that young man. Though we know the end, he was not saved. Unlike this man, Zacchaeus, whose name we remember, and whose deeds we appreciate. Rich, this gospel page. Rich in references that Jesus gives us. Jericho, this city, full of symbols and history, Moses receives the laws, and Jericho stands in front of him. Joshua conquers it. Elijah and Elisha are the protagonists in Jericho of that passage, which takes Elijah to heaven on the chariot of fire. And Elisha takes his place by receiving the cloak. Jesus, who heals in Jericho the blind man, Bartimaeus. And that talks about the parable of the Samaritan, of the Good Samaritan. Taking as an example, Jerusalem and Jericho. Giving in that parable, the commandment of love. Rich of insights. Just as the tree, the sycamore. A tree that was considered a sacred cosmic tree. Assimilated to the phoenix, in ancient history. A tree that for the Egyptians was comparable to the tree of life. The wood was used to build sarcophaguses. In the book of Amos, the prophet himself says of himself to have been, before he became a prophet, a shepherd, and a harvester of sycamores. In Roman civilization, this was a Fostic tree, because it was related to the vicissitudes of Romulus and Remus, who in a basket were laid by the sycamore tree. Then the she-wolf came and suckled them. In Jewish and Christian civilization, plant of elevation, capable of giving height and vision. In a word, the tree that brings you to the meaning of who dies to the world and sin, to be reborn in the tree of life, Christ. Zacchaeus climbs that tree to die to the world and to sin, and descends to be reborn new from above, in Christ, with Christ, and for Christ, his God, which he recognized. Here's the way for Christians, dying to the world, to be perfect. Dying to sin, to elevate oneself and be reborn in Christ. Doing the will of God, well, and quickly. Not those who say, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom, but who does the will of the Lord. This was taught to us by the Maiden of God, Maria Giuseppina. She who showed us the way to be perfect. She who opened her arms to us so that, taking those arms, taking those hands, we could climb the tree. Just as the branches of the sycamore, that were strong trees, easy to climb, who have allowed to elevate themselves and embrace the tree of life, Christ. Here is the image of Mary, that embraces us, and brings us to Christ. Here is the image of this maiden who embraced us, has elevated us, to make us embrace Christ. The tree of life, here descended, to give salvation to all. There will always be those who will murmur, who will always have something to say. As is the case in this page. I say to you, let the dead bury their dead. As Jesus said, go to the houses. Bring my peace. Bless whoever welcomes you. Who does not welcome you, shake the dust and go beyond. For the harvest is great, and the workers are few. And they can't waste time, in the face of murmurings, flee from destructive criticism. Flee from destructive criticism. Those who want to help you by building, by helping, by suggesting. Accept with humility. But those who speak to you only to murmur, to destroy, away. Away from me, I do not know you. That's why the world is at war. Because it has not known he who saves. It has not wanted to welcome his word of peace. There was a small glimmer. Now there is no more. And the more elsewhere, efforts are made to pray, to bring peace. the more the opposite happens. Here are the rotten fruits of a house that is no longer in communion with God. And the truth is before everyone's eyes. Only those who close them, because they do not want to see, don't see all this. Go forward, dear brothers. Heads up, and hearts alive. To be able to bring to all this announcement of salvation. Because God has descended from heaven to bring salvation in the hearts of many. Today salvation has descended in your home. Home, heart. Just as Jesus descended into the heart of this little maiden, who loved him as his mother loved him. Salvation has descended into that heart that contained him, making him grow, to make him meet all those who in time and for time would have arrived. To give them salvation. Here is this house. House of salvation. House of God. Dwelling place of God among men. Where the infant Jesus has descended, to await all those, who like Zacchaeus, they readily want to see him, and once they see and recognize him, change their lives. And those who want to change their lives, must take example from this man. Who once he experienced divine mercy, what does he do? He immediately questions himself. And once immediately, refound those who had been betrayed and robbed. Half of my wealth to the poor, and 4 times the ill-gotten gains, to those who have been defrauded. This and for all those who want the mercy of God. Yes. But once received, dear brothers, one must also humanly make up for it, as far as possible, otherwise too comfortable. If one wants to be a true man, even before being a true Christian, one must do all that one can and must, to manifest that truly life is changed. In Christ, with Christ and for Christ. And so be it.